A chilly Arctic summer has left 533,000 more square miles of ocean covered with ice than at the same time last year, an increase of 29%. The rebound from 2012's record low comes 6 years after the BBC reported that global warming would leave the Arctic ice-free in summer by 2013. Instead, days before the annual autumn refreeze is due to begin, an unbroken ice sheet more than half the size of Europe already stretches from the Canadian islands to Russia's northern shores. Ice sheet graphic JPG+4, how NSIDC got its figures wrong and then kept quiet. Since publication of the original version of this article, the source of the figures, the NASA-funded National Snow and Ice Data Setter NSIDC, was discovered to have made a huge error and then quietly corrected the figure without mentioning it. On September 4, NSIDC, based at the University of Colorado, stated on its website that in August 2013 the Arctic ice cover recovered by a record 2.38 million square kilometers, 919,000 square miles from its 2012. News of this figure was widely reported, including by Mail Online on September 8. But on September 10, the NSIDC quietly changed it to 1.38 million square kilometers, 533,000 square miles, and replaced the original document so the old figure no longer shows up on a main Google search. It can now only be found on an old cached page. The figures in this article have now been corrected. Prompted by an inquiry from Green blogger Bob Ward, the NSIDC spokeswoman Natasha Viskar said the mistake was a typographical error, telling him, "There are no plans to make a statement on the change, because it was not an error in the data. The Northwest Passage from the Atlantic to the Pacific has remained blocked by pack ice all year. More than 20 yachts that had planned to sail it have been left icebound, and a cruise ship attempting the route was forced to turn back." Some eminent scientists now believe the world is heading for a period of cooling that will not end until the middle of this century, a process that would expose computer forecasts of imminent catastrophic warming as dangerously misleading. The disclosure comes 11 months after the Mail on Sunday triggered intense political and scientific debate by revealing that global warming has paused since the beginning of 1997, an event that the computer models used by climate experts failed to predict. In March, this newspaper further revealed that temperatures are about to drop below the level that the models forecast with 90% certainty. The pause, which has now been accepted as real by every major climate research center, is important because the models' predictions of ever-increasing global temperatures have made many of the world's economies divert billions of pounds into green measures to counter climate change. Those predictions now appear gravely flawed. The continuing furor caused by the Mail on Sunday's revelations, which will now be amplified by the return of the Arctic ice sheet, has forced the UN's climate change body to reconsider its position. The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC) was due in October to start publishing its fifth assessment report, a huge 3-volume study issued every 6 or 7 years. It will hold a pre-summit in Stockholm later this month. There won't be any ice at all. How the BBC predicted chaos in 2007. Only 6 years ago, the BBC reported that the Arctic would be ice-free in summer by 2013, citing a scientist in the US who claimed this was a conservative forecast. Perhaps it was their confidence that led more than 20 yachts to try to sail the Northwest Passage from the Atlantic to the Pacific this summer. As of last week, all these vessels were stuck in the ice, some at the eastern end of the passage in Prince Regent Inlet, others further west at Cape Bathurst. Shipping experts said the only way these vessels were likely to be freed was by the icebreakers of the Canadian Coast Guard. According to the official Canadian government website, the Northwest Passage has remained icebound and impassable all summer. The BBC's 2007 report quoted scientist Professor Wisław Mysłowski, who based his views on supercomputer models and the fact that we use a high-resolution regional model for the Arctic Ocean and sea ice. He was confident his results were much more realistic than other projections, which underestimate the amount of heat delivered to the sea ice. Also quoted was Cambridge University expert Professor Peter Wadhams. he backed Professor Maslovsky, saying his model was more efficient than others, because it takes account of processes that happen internally in the ice. He added, "This is not a cycle, not just a fluctuation. In the end, it will all just melt away quite suddenly." BBC Plus 4 leaked documents show that governments, which support and finance the IPCC, are demanding more than 1,500 changes to the report summary for policymakers. They say its current draft does not properly explain the pause. At the heart of the row lie two questions: the extent to which temperatures will rise with carbon dioxide levels, as well as how much of the warming over the past 150 years so far, just 0.8 C, is down to human greenhouse gas emissions, and how much is due to natural variability. And now, much bigger, the spread of Arctic sea ice on August 15, 2013 plus 4. And now, much bigger, the same NASA image taken in 2013. The IPCC claims its models show a pause of 15 years can be expected. But that means that after only a very few years more, they will have to admit they are wrong. Others are more cautious. Dr. Ed Hawkins, of Reading University, drew the graph published by the Mail on Sunday in March showing how far world temperatures have diverged from computer predictions. He admitted the cycles may have caused some of the recorded warming, but insisted that natural variability alone could not explain all of the temperature rise over the past 150 years. Nonetheless, the belief that summer Arctic ice is about to disappear remains an IPCC tenet, frequently flung in the face of critics who point to the pause. Yet there is mounting evidence that Arctic ice levels are cyclical. Data uncovered by climate historians show that there was a massive melt in the 1920s and 1930s, followed by intense ray freezes that ended only in 1979, the year the IPCC says that shrinking began. Professor Curry said the ice's behavior over the next 5 years would be crucial, both for understanding the climate and for future policy. Arctic sea ice is the indicator to watch, she said.
Live, this is One for the Record. I'm Diana. Today is April 9th, and my voice is gone. I tried doing a report and then it disappeared. Now there's no voice left. So what I'm going to do for you guys, I'm going to just attach pictures. I don't know. I got laryngitis somehow. So, it is Wednesday, hump day. It is 3 days down, 2 to go before the weekend. The Watchers is reporting that Curcumin, C-U-R-C-U-M-I-N, will stop the brain damage from fluoride. Look that up. It's on the Watchers, watchers.com, or just look it up. You can Google that. But Curcumin, C-U-R-C-U-M-I-N, will stop fluoride from destroying your brain, supposedly. It's a supplement, it's a spice, it's what's in turmeric, I believe. So take care, be prepared for anything. I did a report, it didn't go through, it crashed, and I'll see you tomorrow. On the flip side, I'll attach things for you guys. Alright, take care. Let's see if I can get rid of this. If I can, then what I'll do is do another report. Alrighty then, take care.
Bring you up to date here now. In this half hour on Fukushima, Arnie Gunderson has a new video out, and he said the video confirms our worst fears. Okay? One scientist said the core materials found almost 500 kilometers from the Fukushima plant. The core materials have been found that far away. That means they were blown into the atmosphere, but beyond that, they're still migrating, they're traveling. Now, how much is projected to be out there from the cores? I don't know. I don't have a number this big. Hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions. What comes next?
Well, I think that the first thing we have to look at is, let's look at all the players and what's going on.
Is that quintillion? I don't know. 40, let's say quintillion. 40 quintillion becquerels per kilogram. That's absurd. That's the core material. And he said they can travel very, very significant distances. Hot particles are being found in 25% of the samples from Tokyo and Fukushima. Accent on Tokyo. 25% of the samples have hot particles in them. As was said on this program a month and a half ago, Tokyo really should have been evacuated.
Yeah. What's likely to happen, and if you look at the a program that was recently on DirecTV, which is called Strip the City, it was about a month ago, and they talked about the most likely city to have a superquake is Tokyo. Now, 1 year, if you go back into history, 1 year before the major tsunami that struck Fukushima, Daiichi, and the surrounding prefectures, there was a major superquake in South America, in Chile. And we know the Ring of Fire is like a bell. The best way to think of it is not as just a ring of magma, but think of that entire plate as one giant plate with a ring of fire around it. And when the energy is released on one side of that, it has harmonic effects that affect the other side of the bell.
Of course, yeah. Yep.
So, if you actually look at
5.8 in Panama today, which is a reciprocal of the Chile quake. They're linked.
Right. And so all these will then bounce back and forth. And in fact, if you start using harmonic models, you could probably predict, and I'm willing to bet there's a division of our government that has plate tectonics and supercomputers being used to actually predict where the quakes will happen next. They know they're not using anything like I mentioned, noise-canceling technology to cause future superquakes to be broken into mini-quakes, have a mini-quake every day, which wouldn't be detectable.
Mm-hmm.
People would notice it, but it would be there. It would be like, it would be better to have 10,000 microquakes a day than a megaquake every 20 years that would rip the city apart.
Yeah.
So they're not doing that. And it's a virtual certainty that in the next year, we're going to have a large enough quake that Fukushima is going to be the least of our problems. The least. Now, I want to say this because people need to grasp there were 5 other sites that were damaged just by the earthquake. There was no tsunami struck those other sites of significance.
By the way, the damage done to Fukushima is now acknowledged to be done by the quake, not the tsunami.
Right. What that means is 5 other major sites in northern Japan are likely to lose control and containment and have a China syndrome occur, a core meltdown.
But don't worry, Abe only wants to restart 1/3 of the computers now.
Right. And we have the second major
running the reactors. Mm-hmm.
Then we have the next radiation, which is the Israeli attempt to strike all the nuclear centrifuge facilities, including at Qom, with our nuclear weapons, including our bunker busters and tunnel.
All shipped and being stored where? Diego Garcia.
Right. And they also intend to hit and directly strike with Russian scientists and technicians there the Bushehr reactor, which is one of the largest reactor sites on Earth.
Now see, if that doesn't prompt Pakistan and India to come after that wonderful little democracy with everything they have, because they're going to be subjected to potentially millions of deaths. Marco Kaltofen. This has to do with something that affects many of you listening, whether you're in Japan, along the West Coast, anywhere in the U.S., in fact, anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, you're a potential candidate to be able to measure actual hot particles in your home. In your home, you say? Well, my home is safe. If I go outside, it's going to be worse. No, that's not the case. Now, you all have heating and air conditioning systems in your home. Most of you do. Even if you have just an air filter with a kind of an input-output, and in the middle of it you got a replaceable filter. You can pull that replaceable filter out after a month or two, and you can measure that with your Inspector Plus or whatever Geiger counter you might have. If you have an HVAC system, you'll have a return air duct, and in that return air duct will be a filter. You buy them at your local hardware store. They're $15. You stick them in, you change them every 3 or 4 months. Well, I changed mine some months ago, and my normal background is 30, 35, around there. And I was getting readings of 130, 140 on that filter. It was picking up dust in my house that was causing a reading on my handheld Inspector Plus. Now that's what this is about, and it's very interesting. What you don't want to get when you get a HEPA filter, please, is the kind you have been told about that are really neat with the washable, reusable filters. No, you want to get the disposable kind. Now, if you don't want to do your own measurement, there are labs that will do it for you. The point is, you do need to have HEPA filtration in your house. You do need to have constant changing in your HVAC filter system. The replacement, whether you've got 2 ducts that are return airs or just one, doesn't matter. Here's a little bit from the video, and we'll put it up tonight so you can listen to the whole thing.
I'm here today to introduce professional engineer Marco Kaltofen in one of the most important videos Fairwinds Energy Education has ever produced. 3 years ago, Fairwinds was one of the first organizations to talk about hot particles that are scattered all over Japan and North America's west coast. Hot particles are dangerous and difficult to detect. In this video, Mr. Kaltofen discusses the hottest hot particle he has ever found, and it was discovered more than 300 miles from the Fukushima Daiichi site. If Fairwinds Energy Education was a Japanese website, the state secrets law would likely prevent us from issuing this video.
That's right.
I'll provide a brief summary at the end of the video.
All right, here's just a little bit.
I'm Marco Kaltofen.
A little bit from Marco.
I'm a civil engineer, and I'm a PhD candidate at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Most of my research looks at radioactive and chemical contaminants and how they wind up in house dust. And the reason for doing that is this is a very important way that the general public is exposed to things like radioactive contaminants. In looking at indoor environments, they tend to be much more contaminated than the surroundings outside. Houses act like a trap, and they tend to collect outdoor contaminants, and they expose people as much as 24 hours a day, versus consider how short a time most people spend outdoors. Your exposure is actually much less. One of the nice things about social media is that we can talk to a lot of people and hook up with volunteers and volunteer scientific organizations.
Okay, well, he goes on to talk about how to get these return air filters tested, and if you have a smaller unit in your home, how to get those tested. You can do it yourself. But the idea is that this stuff gets in the house and it has no way to exit the house. So it gets collected, some of it gets passed through the filters and runs back into the air. So there are things to learn about home safety that this video will address very effectively. Go ahead, Bill.
If you're trained in hazardous materials, for example, you're trained that once you reach 3 times the millisieverts per hour or levels for counts per minute, you have to treat the site as hazmat, which means you need to have decon showers, keep your boots and your other things outside, be able to shower off or spray off your body to things, make sure your pets are sprayed down because they're going to carry hot particles into the home on their feet and on their fur. They're going to be brushing against trees, digging in the ground, doing other things. They're going to pick up hot particles and carry them in. The problem is that here's what I see this going. We're setting up a network with your friend David Crane, and I'm going to be one of the sites here in Southern California. The real issue is what will happen when the public really gets the idea they need to have what we call air raid alarm. It's not like during the Second World War where an air raid was a V2 bomb coming in or the German jets coming into Britain. It'll be a wave of radiation coming in. The radiation detectors get high enough, you have to activate what's called hazmat procedures. What I want to envision is that our network will firstly have can tell a frontal wave, at least a ground level wave of radiations coming in, but most of the plumes, and this is a misinformation that Arnie said, most of the plume radiation that's airborne is not at the ground level, it's at 25,000 to 35,000 feet or higher. The second thing is most people don't realize that the radiation level in the ocean will be firstly on the surface because of surface tension with buckyballs on the surface of the water, but it'll be either mixed in the water if it's not soluble, or if it's a bioabsorbable molecule because it's similar to something like potassium or magnesium and calcium, like strontium 90 replaces calcium, cesium-137 replaces magnesium and potassium. You're going to end up with these being dissolved into the biosphere and being bioconcentrated in the mass. And if some of those organisms die, they carry their dead bodies to the bottom of the ocean and form a layer. So the longer isotopes are accumulating because they aren't yet accumulated in the biomass of the dying ocean. Those are going to not, some of the heavier isotopes will not be carried in the rain. They're going to stay in the water, so they'll continue to concentrate in the Pacific. The rain will carry things that are directly vented as nanoparticles into the atmosphere from burps from underground thorium that's going critical.
Correct.
And some of those will create steam jets because when they're forming tritium, it's tritium created at the same time to carry superheated steam, so it vents. It can carry like 10, 20 kilometers superheated radioactive tritium and other isotopes to the tube train system of Tokyo or out underneath the ocean floor, then vent out 5 or 10 miles out into the Pacific Ocean. So with all these different pathways, for him to make the statement that those particles are only on the west coast, even if you take into account wave action on the surface of the water, most of the really highly radioactive isotopes are going to be high in the atmosphere, and they're going to circle the planet. So you might have higher
I think they already are, Bill.
Yeah, you might have a higher concentration in Belarus. They had an announcement 2 years ago, January, where they're finding hot plutonium because they're doing hazmat testing there, and I believe the Czech Republic. And they found out, they thought it was a local, Russian-era Chernobyl-style reactor. When in fact,
no, go ahead.
It turned out it was coming actually all the way around the northern hemisphere, and was picked up in Eastern Europe.
In New Mexico, they measured plutonium 3 days after the first explosion at Fukushima.
Right. So you have multiple pathways for the enter. You also will cross the equator. In contradiction to Dr. Caldecott, there's a escalator that brings water at 300 times the volume across from the northern to southern hemisphere every day. There are also transoceanic currents that carry along the coastlines of every continent that takes 26 months to circle the planet. So we are gradually poisoning every ocean, not just northern hemisphere. So what people need to know is that some of these things are bioaccumulated in the life form, some are not. Some are soluble, some are not. There's various different types of way they pollute, so each of them is separate. But what's going to happen is we could have a situation where, say 5 years from now or 2 years from now, after things get really bad, because when Fukushima finally reaches it's only what I call a first shot. What's really going to happen is there's a major quake, let's say next year or the year after, is we will have 10 or 20 times the level of radiation coming out because they have multiple sites. We will have perhaps not dodged the bullet because Israel will have attacked Iran. What's really particularly dangerous is that they've calculated the amount of radiation and the amount of climate effects that will occur if there's an exchange of nuclear weapons between India and Pakistan. And it's enough to push the world into a nuclear winter for 4 to 5 years. And I don't think people grasp that we're already heading into a Maunder type ice age. This would dramatically speed up that process. So we have a number of very, very catastrophic things that are hanging in the balance here. And Fukushima, believe it or not, even though it seems so big right now, is the least of our problem. Believe it or not.
All right.
Because they're doing nothing to deactivate all these nuclear reactors in every continent, like along the coast of France and Britain and the United States.
Point Le Havre is just perfect. You get a tsunami in there, and
or just even
Sellafield,
the Indian Point reactor off New York City, which is so close to New York.
Indian Point should be closed down yesterday.
Right, and all of these nuclear materials sitting on site, either in casks or in cooling pools, is just plain. It's like keep on playing roulette with your buddies.
We're gonna lose.
Treehouse.
We're gonna lose.
Yeah, and eventually you spin the chamber enough times and you're going to blow your brains up.
Absolutely. Yep.
So all I can say is, I know Arnie said it tones it down. I tone it up a lot because I want people to understand Fukushima, believe it or not, is the least of our problem.
Yeah, Arnie is heroic, but he is very elegant and diplomatic, and he does play things down.
Right. Well, I want to play it up to a level where people get how bad this will be.